Happy New Year to everybody, and I'm so glad to see so many of
Malalka.
Malalka.
New Year's today.
Okay. Ukrainian New Year's today, so happy Ukrainian New Year's. Okay. And this is the first Café Scientifique for the 2015. So welcome to the first Café Scientifique. These are the events organized by my office to bring the amazing health researchers at the University of Manitoba closer to the public in a comfortable setting, and we think the bookstore provides that comfortable setting. Today's topic has certainly interested you, otherwise you wouldn't be here, both in terms of this intent and the topic. When I say the topic now, I don't want you to get up now. This doesn't mean to apply to you now, but get off your butt. Sitting is the new smoking. Our expert panelists will be sharing their perspective with you shortly. I would like to introduce you, your moderator for this evening, who will tell you more about the panelists and some of the ground rules that will guide the discussion this evening. Dr. Philip Gardner is a professor of kinesiology and recreational management, and also a professor of physiology in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Manitoba. He is a Canada Research Chair in Physical Activity and Health Studies, and is the Director of the Health, Leisure, and Human Performance Research Institute. Dr. Gardner is an author of over 125 research articles, 3 textbooks in the area of the effects of physical activity, inactivity, and aging on the nervous and neuromuscular systems. Please welcome Dr. Philip Gardner.
Thanks very much, Dr. Jayas, and welcome. I'm going to be the moderator for this Café Scientifique this evening. Just some information. I have some sort of housekeeping notes that I have to pass on to you. Each of our panelists are going to present for about 5 minutes on their perspective take on this particular topic. After all the panelists have spoken, I'm going to open the floor for discussion and questions, and I'll be passing the mic around so that everybody can hear what your question is. This evening's panel presentations are being videotaped for later uploading on my Café Scientifique website, and there's also somebody taking photos. So a link to the video will be posted on the University of Manitoba Café Scientifique web site next week, so you'll be able to see the presentations then. At about 8:25, I'll take the last question. So by 8:30, we'll have everything wrapped up here. There's refreshments here beside me on the table, and some materials and a sign sheet if you want more information for future events like this. You notice also that there were evaluation sheets on the chairs. We'd appreciate it very much if you fill those out and leave them on the materials table up here at the end of the session. I've got some reminders too about the types of questions that we prefer that you not ask. I'll outline those when we start to enter our question period. If you're interested in tweeting our hashtag, it's number Café Scientifique. It's supposed to be posted on the curtain behind the panels. Is it? Is it? Oh, okay, good. Okay, so this brings me then to tonight's expert panel, and I'll introduce them very briefly from my left, and then when it's time for them to present, I'll give you more details on each individual. So to my immediate left is Sue Boreskie. Dr. Danielle Bouchard is next to her. Jonathan McGavick is next to Danielle, and last but not least is Todd Duhamel. And I'll introduce them specifically again when they present. So let me present the first presenter. Sue Boreskie is a fitness, recreation, and wellness specialist with over 30 years of experience involving a wide range of products and projects and facilities. She has an extensive knowledge of the operation of fitness community wellness facilities through her work at the University of Manitoba, the Wellness Institute, the Reh-Fit Jewish Community Center, and the Reh-Fit Center, where she currently serves as the CEO. So I'll pass it to Sue Boreskie.
Thank you, Phil. So my role tonight is I'm not the stellar all-day researcher as my colleagues on the left. I'm much more the sitting administrator now. So I'm going to tell you the dangers of being an administrator and sitting at a desk if you're not walking, and talk a little bit about the definitions, because I think we throw out sitting, sedentary behavior, physical inactivity as they're all the same, and they're not really technically all the same. And then I'll give you a little bit of strategies that we use in terms of talking to clients in the population of how to get up and be more active. And not necessarily in exercise, but in becoming more physically active. So first of all, why is there such a link with sitting and smoking? And it really is because smoking is a modifiable factor, so it's similar in the sense that we can modify sitting in terms of we can sit less. The other thing is, years ago in the 50s, it used to be cool to smoke. Now it's cool to sit and have all this technology so you don't move, so it's very similar in that way. It's also a new public health concern because we know people are sitting more, we're getting more issues now, and so that's why they've become more linked, and you'll hear my colleagues talk about, is it the new smoking or not? But they are very similar in those factors. When we talk about sedentary behavior, we're talking about either you're sitting or you're prone and your metabolism is up a little bit from just sleeping. So all of us right now are exhibiting sedentary behavior, including myself, except Danielle here. We are sedentary, and the minute we get up and start moving, we're becoming more active. When we say someone is physically active, we're usually referring that they're meeting Canadian standards of what physically active means, and that's 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity a week. Most Canadians don't make that, and there's a small percentage that do, but that's what we talk about when we're talking about physical activity. And then the other thing is when you're inactive, it's really, you're not optimizing those health benefits. So anything under 150, you could be active, but not enough for health gains. You can be sedentary and active, so there's a lot of you probably in this room that exercise regularly, but you're still sedentary. Because you might be going for exercise sessions and getting your 3 times a week, but the rest of the time you may be sedentary in your work. There's other people here that are sedentary but inactive, because it's a double whammo. You sit most of the day maybe in your job or your occupation, and then you're also not meeting Canadian standards in terms of how much physical activity for health gains. Then we have not sedentary and inactive, and then not sedentary and active. So you can have like 4 quadrants. You can have a combo. So at our center now, when we've had people coming and exercise 3 times a week, now we're telling them, well, you have to think more than that now. And I know a lot of people even have trouble with exercise. Now we're adding this other component. You have to become more physically active on a regular basis and get up from exercise. If you think about in your waking hours, 50 to 60% of your waking hours is sedentary in Canada. That's what the average would be, about 9.5 hours per day. So if you think about today, your activity today, think of how many hours you spent either reclined or sitting. And that will give you a pretty good idea of whether you're sedentary or not sedentary. But you could still go for your exercise session, right? So remember that. So what are the health risks that are coming out? And some of the research is preliminary, but there's some relationship, and it's showing that we need to do a lot more research. And one of the things we know that the more people sit, we're seeing that there's a greater chance of early death. And why is that evidence? Is we're seeing mortality from more cardiovascular diseases and other causes of death. And we know that those who spend 70 to 75% of their day sedentary have 5 times as much risk of perhaps dying. So those are some studies, but as you know in research, you have to have many studies before you can make final conclusion. But the evidence is starting to show that. So people have asked us, if you're sedentary but you get up and stand, does that help? Okay, so you can just stand up and not necessarily move much, but standing up versus sitting. And some research does show that you have better glucose control, you have a decrease in your waist circumference, and some other indicators that show it's better. It obviously would be better if you're standing and moving. That's even better. But it is, again, the sitting action is the worst versus standing, and the better thing would be doing some movement. They're also showing that some research is showing, even let's say you weren't doing physical activity, but were just less sedentary, they do show that there's health benefits independent of exercise. So that just standing, doing less what I call sitting positions, doing standing or light activity throughout the day does show that you'll have some improved health gains. Now what we don't know is how much sitting has to be negated, or if you're doing a lot of sitting, how much exercise would negate all the benefit, the sitting, and then vice versa. That's what we don't know yet. So if I do have a sedentary lifestyle, meaning that I'm at a desk job all day and I'm not, let's say, on a treadmill desk or standing on a regular basis, will that be outweighed if I go out for a run 3 times a week? That's the question we don't necessarily have all the evidence for. But there's a growing evidence that's showing that it is a link and that it's independent of your physical activity or exercise sessions. So we also know that there's some studies that show also sedentary behavior affects your psychological well-being. So, and I think that kind of makes sense, common sense, but if you are sitting down for about 10 hours a day, we find there's a 29%, one study showed a 29% of those individuals who sat a lot felt psychological distress, more so than people who don't sit. So these are some of the preliminary studies, and my colleagues are going to be telling you a lot more about their studies and what they have researched, but I thought I'd end up with some strategies for decreasing sitting. Because that's a lot of what we do, or a recline. We're very good at reclining too. Well, I am at the end of the day, which isn't good. Because you come back from work or you're sitting all day and what do you feel like doing? You feel tired and you want to lay back, right? Well, what you need to do is stand up. So things you can do is walking meetings. So if you're in a workplace, there's no reason why we have to sit across the table and talk. We can actually walk and talk at the same time, or even stand. So what I've done even with my management team, every 20 minutes we just stand up. And it's odd, it's funny, the minute you stand up, it's almost like we're taking a break and you have to keep reminding people. You can stand and continue a meeting. You don't have to be sitting and quiet, standing and talking. You can do a combination. Now you'll see a lot of standing desks or treadmills. So I actually set my computer that every 20 minutes I have a buzzer that goes off and I just stand up. It looks odd, I'm sure, when people are exercising out there wondering what I'm doing, but also I stand up. I don't have a computer that goes up and down, but I just keep going and then I sit down again. Other places are active design is becoming very big. So here's a book I just brought, a little prop. Buildings are being designed to create activity now to decrease sitting behaviors in the workplace. So for instance, I was in Italy at a beautiful fitness center, but the whole fitness center, even like for instance, my office there would have been set up that I would be sitting on an exercise ball. I would have a stationary bike in my office, so if I want to move onto the bike, I could do that while I was walking. But they had made every effort to make sure their employees continued being active, including things like moving your printer for a central area, emptying your own garbage can rather than someone picking it up for you. So just anything to get you up. So just to wrap up, who should we be targeting when we're talking about sitting? Dr. Bouchard is going to talk about, in her opinion, and from what we see in the preliminary, is working population and kids are probably a good place for us to start because they are groups that are easier perhaps to target, and she'll be talking about that in her study. But I guess to conclude, I'd like to say to be healthy, there are many behaviors we're being talked about or being spoken about now: smoking, drinking in moderation, eating healthy, now exercise, and now we have to sit less. The question is, what combination of those and how much? So at that point, I'll leave it to my colleagues.
Thanks very much, Sue. Very good start to this discussion. To Sue's left is, immediate left is Danielle Bouchard, who's going to be our next presenter. Danielle is an assistant professor in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Rec Management at University of Manitoba. Her research interests are increasing the proportion of Canadians who meet the national recommendations in physical activity that Sue just pointed out, reducing sedentary time in office workers using a treadmill workstation, and understanding how to increase the success of lifestyle interventions in obese older adults. So I'll pass it over to Danielle.
Okay, well, thank you very much. As you see, like I'm standing, trying to preach what I'm saying. In my own office, I also have a working station on a treadmill, and I'm trying to influence more people to get that way, and it worked for some colleagues of mine. I'm impressed about one thing tonight. There's a lot of people. I wish there were people that give money for research being in the room so they see how people want to have information on this. But the thing that disappoints me is most of you are sitting, and the one that are standing, it's only because you didn't have a chair. And if I would ask people to stand up right now, most of you would feel a bit odd to do so because it's socially accepted that we should sit. We go to an office, a doctor's office, and you say, "Oh, I'll stand up." You have a question, you want to go to the bathroom, or there's something wrong. So sitting becomes, like as Sue said, something really like expected and normalized. Like that's how we should be. So to continue on what Sue did, talked about, some of my research is about reducing that sedentary behavior. There's enough evidence showing association. Like we know that people that are sitting more are more at risk of different health problems, but we don't have evidence or anything really strong about how much sitting you need to reduce to have some impacts on those health outcomes. How many hours you need to stand up? How many hours you need to not sit? To, let's say, reduce your body weight, because that's a big thing that people will ask me, like, if I start doing work on a treadmill workstation, will I lose weight? That I have phone calls on this every month. They learn that I have that, and then they're asking me if I lost weight since I've been on this. I know, I just eat more. And my waist circumference, there's nothing to do with the fact that I'm sedentary, I'm actually pregnant. Okay, so coming back to the fact that I'm researching the fact that we could reduce the sedentary behavior, and the way that I target it so far is with workplace environment. And the reason why I targeted that place is first, there's about 70% of Canadian adults that are working. You're not forced to go to the gym, you're not forced to go outside and walk, but you're forced, in some sense, to go to work. We could target also kids because they're forced, in some sense, to go to school. But the problem with kids versus adults is that when they're getting to a certain age, 30 and plus, you have more risk of chronic conditions. And that we want it or not, the government that we have in place anyway for now is more interested in treating people than preventing. And there's many reasons for that, but financially it costs less to treat people, because even if you prevent, you'll have to treat. So just put it that way for now. The adults are more prone to have chronic conditions right now, so we need to do something about that right now. That's one thing. And also, there's the strategy that we see in the workplace right now is to create a fitness facility where people can go. So you probably most of you have a fitness facility that is free for some of you to go to and exercise after work during lunchtime. And if you go there, well, if you like silence, it's a good place to go because no one shows up. So we need to reverse that. But that's another story. We're not talking about exercise right now. We're talking about sitting too much. But that's the strategy that their workplace will say, I did something for my employees. I got them a fitness facility. Just use it. Usually there's no one to help you in there. There's like good machines. They're cute and everything. But it's not working for some reason. So our thought was like, can we reduce sedentary behavior? Because yes, I'm a good believer in doing exercise, but for most of Canadian, we've been saying that for a lot of years. Before I was born, they were like doing promotion about that, and it's still not getting it, right? For some reason, some barriers are not getting people to be active. So some people will probably never be active, regardless of how much we tackle that task. So can we reduce just the sitting time and have some of the health benefits, and maybe even all benefits, who knows? So what we did as a first step is we recruited people, find a company first, find an employer that wanted to be on board, and that was not an easy task. And we found a workplace that was willing to include treadmill workstation in their setting for a period of 3 months. And our goal was just to see, is it feasible to share a workstation that has a treadmill? And see a bit of the health benefits. It was not funded, we didn't have too much money to do this, but we did it with little means, and to see, is it feasible to share? And the reason why we tried that first is that it's impossible to think that your employer will buy a treadmill desk for each one of the employees. It's not going to happen. So it needs to be cost effective. So one way that we thought about this is we looked into the literature, and most people that have a treadmill desk in their office, they're using it for about 2 hours, 2 hours per day, per shift. So if we separate that in a typical shift, 8 hours, there's 4 people that can actually use that treadmill and maybe have like benefit from it like 4 times more than if you had one in your office. Second thing, you might go on vacation, maternity leave, whatever. No one is using it while you're gone. So like by sharing it, you have more buck for your, like you have more bang for your buck. Is that how you say that? Okay, good. So that was our thinking. So we went, where we went, and you probably, I mean, maybe you've seen that in the news a couple of months ago. We went to a health link. So when you call, if there's an emergency, not an emergency, but you have a health question, Okay, so like those people might have answered your call a year ago, and even now, because they still have a treadmill desk, while walking. You didn't notice it. They're not out of breath on running shoes and trying to like not sweat on the phone. It's more like moving, and it's not. I'm not even talking about walking. If you go like for a walk, usually you go at about 3.5 miles an hour. When you're working on those workstations, we're talking about 2 miles an hour. So it's almost too slow to kind of have your workout. That's for sure. But that's a typical speed that you see. So we asked those people to work about 2 hours a day, and they had to talk to each other to know, like, when am I going to go on the treadmill and where do you want to go? And some people preferred it in the morning to get rid of it. Some people preferred it at the end because they were tired of sitting, whatever. They were organizing it among them. And what we found, and we had 25 people in that study, and mostly women. Not that many are not interested, but in that setting, there's just more women. Maybe that's the case. Maybe more women are interested, but we'll see later on in other studies. So when we were in the workplace, after 3 months, we've seen two big results. The first one, three. The first one is it was feasible to share. So the people were able to make it happen, so we could probably replicate that in other settings. The only thing though, it's the fact that when you're in calling center, you can switch places really easily. Like in a day, I could just go in Martha's workstation, and tomorrow I'll go in Laura's workstation. Compared to like in a setting like at a university, for example, you have your own office and you might have these settings in your own environment. So we need to tweak it a bit now to kind of see if it's feasible to adapt that in different settings. But anyway, so that was the first finding. The second finding is that blood pressure reduced by 7 millimeters of mercury during the study, and that was only 3 months. That was impressive for me that it works with exercise, because we don't even see that when you're doing, we're barely seeing that when you do exercise at Reh-Fit, let's say, for 3 months, and even more time before you actually see that as a reduction. So that was impressive, and we're moving forward with that through funding with heart and stroke, hopefully, if we get funded, to work and to understand like what's going on. Is that really something that we can expect? And if so, this is really a strong finding, because we can reduce maybe blood pressure by sitting less. And that was only 3 months, and that was only 2 hours per shift. And actually, I should say that most people only use it for about 65 minutes a shift as an average. So that was pretty impressive. The last thing that we'll talk about is the third finding, was that before we started the study, we made a questionnaire about sleeping quality. And those are people working on shifts, so it might be different than people working 8 to 4. But 7 people out of the 25 were having problems based on their scale of sleeping. And when we finished the study, none of them report, like, they didn't say I had trouble or not. It's a questionnaire, validated questionnaire. And there was no one at the end of the study being like classified as having sleeping problems. So this is another finding that we found that we want to pursue. So maybe sitting less has an impact on your quality of sleep. Why? How? I have much more, and that's a good thing because I'm young and I'll be there for a while. But there's many things that we don't know. There's many things that we know, but we need to move forward and see how much people will get in this. And one thing that is going to be needed later on is that we need to convince the employer, and because they're the one that are going to get that setting set up. So the way that we're thinking these days is, and we might get there, is if we can reduce sick days, we would save millions to companies. And I was talking with the human resources at the university and I said, how many sick days you need to reduce it to have really an impact financially? And they told me like 1 day per year or sick day would be enough to have really a big financial impact. And I think we can get there by doing this, hopefully. Because we need to have the buy-in from the employer. And having only the employee going to the employer and say, hey, it would be cool to have that, it's probably not going to make it. So we need more solid research evidence to move forward with that. So I'll pass it to John.
Okay, thanks very much, Danielle. To Danielle's left is our next speaker, John McGavick. Is the Robert Wallace Cameron Chair in Evidence-Based Child Health and Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics and Child Health in the College of Medicine at the University of Manitoba. He's established the Center for Physical Activity and Cardiometabolic Health at the Children's Hospital Research Institute of Manitoba, a research affiliate of the university where he conducts his research. His lab is working to determine the role of physical activity in the prevention and management of type 2 diabetes and the mechanisms to explain these effects. So, John.
Thank you. I ran 10 miles before I got here, and Danielle's standing for 40 minutes. Which one do you think is better? Okay, so I'm going to just change the pace for a couple reasons. I've been here. I'm applauding you for coming here instead of going to see The Hobbit. Well done. Good choice. A little cheaper, better food. But also, we're speaking to the choir, right? 90% of the people that show up to these things are already living healthy, active lifestyles. So I want this to be, right now you're not listening to As It Happens or The Current or Ideas, so we're going to try to stimulate your minds a little bit. So there are 3 messages I want you to take away from this today. The first, there's no evidence that sedentary living is even close to smoking. No evidence. Number 2, I know that's a little controversial, I apologize. So number 1, no evidence. Number 2, it's the wrong culprit. And number 3 is that we need to focus on something else. Okay? So, is there evidence to show this? Now, when you look at evidence, you have to figure out for yourselves, where do you get good information around science? Okay? Do you get it from Gwyneth Paltrow? Do you get it from, God forbid, Dr. Oz? Right? Where do you go find it? So when you're reading literature or you're hearing about science, there are 3 different types of studies that you need to know. The first one is cross-sectional, where we take a look at people at the same amount of time and we compare them. So for example, they would compare my lifestyle to Rob Ford. I run more than Rob Ford runs. I'm less sedentary than Rob Ford, and we could look at our heart attack rates, or our heart attack risk, right? But there are a lot of other things that Rob Ford does that I don't do that might contribute to his heart disease risk, right? So it's not really a fair comparison. The other study design would be a longitudinal one, where we take a whole bunch of people and you try to control for some of those other factors. You follow them over time. So in this case, the egg comes before the chicken. So you would look at some behaviors like sitting and follow people long term to see whether or not their health changes, whether they get diabetes or heart disease or whether they die. And that's cleaner because the egg's coming before the chicken, but at the same time, changes in your sedentary behavior might be clustered with other things. And then the third one is an experiment, where you actually take a bunch of people and you force them to stand, right? So you get rid of all the chairs in the university, or you get rid of all desks and you have a public policy that says no one's allowed to sit anymore ever, right? Or if you want to sit, you have to go outside across the street, and we got a whole bunch of chairs outside where all the sitters go, and we mock the sitters as they sit out there. And in the cold, we'll give them blankets maybe so they feel a little bit better, right? So right now, what kind of evidence do we have that sitting is bad for you? The landmark study came out of the Mayo Clinic, just a little further south, out of a lab by James Levine, and he was the first guy to get a treadmill at his office. And he had a study of 8 people, or 16 people, 8 in one group, 8 in the other. It was cross-sectional, and he showed that if people that were overweight or obese, they tended to move less. They were more sedentary, and he had these fancy little things that he put on the people. They were less fidgety, actually. So people felt like the more fidgety they were, the better off they were going to be. Do we have good longitudinal data? Some of the data that we were quoting earlier is longitudinal. The downside is sedentary living is a hot topic now. In the 70s and the 80s, when we were studying people, we weren't asking them how often they were sitting. The other part is, if I asked you how often you sit, could you give me any real sense? So it's a hard one. We have tools, and Danielle's using them, where we can track your sitting, we can track your sedentary behavior. Todd's using them as well. They're accelerometers, so that's just coming out now. And when I take a look at that data in kids, there's no evidence in kids anyways to suggest that the more they sit, the worse they are. And then finally, with experiments, as far as I know, we don't have any really, really solid experiments where we've either... Actually, we have a couple of really good solid experiments. One of them I was involved in Texas, where we took people and we sat them down. We laid them down for 5 weeks to simulate what it's like to go into space. What do you think happened? They got pretty sick. But they could reverse it right away, right? So In the extreme cases, we have some experiments, but we really don't have any good experiments to suggest that. So evidence is not there, and we need you, as the audience, to really search for good evidence and to ask the people that provide you with good evidence to back that up. So the second thing is, it's the wrong culprit. So when you're looking at evidence, you want to see things that are really effective, that pack the biggest punch. And so in some of these studies, when we take a look at modifiable behaviors that lead to changes in health, or that are related to changes in health, the biggest ones are fitness. And in children, the other biggest one is vigorous intensity exercise. Okay, so my fear, if we focus on just sitting, is that we're going to miss the boat and advocate for the wrong things. So there's some landmark studies that were done down in Dallas, taking a look at people living with chronic disease. So lung disease, heart disease, diabetes, and they stratified them based on how far they could go on a treadmill test. So sometimes when you go to the hospital and you need to get your heart checked, they put you on a test where the speed goes up and the grade goes up and you go on as long as you can. And the longer you go, the more fit you are. Lance Armstrong can go very far. He's fit. With or without the medication he was taking. Okay? Rob Ford would not be able to go as far. Okay? Within each of those groups, regardless of the condition that they had, the more fit they were, the less likely they were to die. And more importantly, in individuals that carried extra weight, if their fitness was in the higher range, they almost negated the extra weight that they were carrying around. It was a concept called fitness and fatness. So in my world, fitness is probably the strongest and most robust predictor that we have. And then within our work in kids, if we take a look at the 3 risk factors that really dominate, or the 3 behaviors that really dominate risk in kids, the first one is how fit they are, so how well they do on that shuttle run test that you had to do in gym class. The second one would be how much time they spend being vigorously active. Okay? So the difference here would be comparing an 11-year-old to an 18-year-old. Okay, so when the bell rings at school and the door opens, what happens to the 11-year-olds? They're running for no reason, right? They're just running around, freedom. Okay, you don't need gyms. They don't want chairs, right? What do you tell kids all the time? Stop fidgeting, sit down. We're telling them to sit down, but they don't want to sit down. 18-year-olds, they're going out to smoke, right? So the difference there is that inherently, I think kids want to get that vigorous physical activity. And when we've done our studies, the biggest signal that relates to health outcomes is vigorous activity. On the other side, sitting isn't the case, but screen time is really bad. So not just telling kids not just to sit, but just to avoid the screens is probably our biggest message. I didn't start my watch. So what do we have to say about this next movement here? I think this is one of the tools in your armament of behaviors to promote health, but it can't be the only one that we focus on. If there was something that I would want to advocate for, it would be to go to the Reh-Fit Center, get your fitness tested, and focus on things that would improve your fitness. So that's my case.
Okay, thanks, John. Well, now we've got a little bit of controversy for you to think about for our question period, right? Our last speaker to the left of John is Todd Duhamel. Todd's an associate professor in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Health Management at University of Manitoba, and he's established his research lab at the Institute of Cardiovascular Sciences at the St-Boniface Hospital Research Center. His research examines the role of physical activity for the prevention and treatment of cardiovascular disease. Todd.
Thanks. I want to give a shout out to my son Dylan and Ashley, or my daughter Ashley, because they were really excited to come and see me talk. I think it's pretty cool. I'm a professor. John presents some interesting perspectives on physical activity or sedentary behavior or sitting and things. John's background is slightly different than my own, where my current research, I work with a lot of patients and people that have cardiovascular disease, and one of the clinical trials we're doing right now is looking at, can you help people to become more fit before their surgery happens. So if you go in to see a doctor and you find out you have heart disease, and they say you need to have cardiac surgery, but you have to wait 4 months. That's a reality for a lot of people in Manitoba and across Canada with their healthcare system. Now the good news is it's really safe to wait 4 months usually. The standard of care actually is if your life's endangered in a short amount of time, you get in within 24 hours. Okay, so I'm going to start there. But for those people that are on the waiting list for on average 4 months, what do? They sit. They go home and they're scared. They're actually told, the doctors tell them you should go and you should walk and you should do some exercise. But the reality is they're scared because they don't want to make their heart disease worse. They don't want to die of a heart attack while they're waiting for cardiac surgery. So our Canadian Institute of Health Research funded research over the next 4 years is going to try to get people to sit less and move more as a kind of as a slogan that we're using. And we're hoping by doing that we can actually improve their health before they go in for surgery, and then they can get out of hospital 1 day sooner. I know you might say, well, what's the difference if they're in hospital for 1 more day or less? Well, 20% of people actually have really bad health outcomes if they stay in hospital 7 days rather than 6. And the rates of depression, if you're in hospital 7 days rather than 6 days, goes up twofold. So think about that. If you're in hospital for an extra 24 hours, you get more depressed. And if I was eating food every day for 6 days, I'd probably be pretty depressed too. So that 7th day, I want to get out of there. So a lot of my research is looking at that. So we know that vigorous exercise is really good, but we also know that most people that get heart disease are between 40 to 90. And I might ask you guys a question. Maybe the older population here. How many of you feel like going out and running sprint intervals right now? I knew you were going to say that. But a lot of people aren't necessarily willing to do that because they don't know how, they have no interest in doing that, they don't want to put on spandex and go and run on a treadmill anymore. Okay, so the reality is we need to have different kind of public health messages. We need to find ways to trick people into doing physical activity. Or we need to find ways that are easier to stop your health getting worse. Okay, and if we find these stealth interventions, that's a term I stole from John a couple of years ago. So if we do the stealth intervention, if you're not sitting, what are you doing? You're doing anything but sitting, which is a good thing. Okay, and the interesting thing is if you sit, or if you sit and read a book, you burn more energy by reading a book. And McNally Robinson will like that because they sell a lot of books. Okay, and that's a good starting point. So then the question might be is why do you burn more energy when you're reading a book rather than just sitting? And part of it is because you start getting your central nervous system and your brain kind of thinking, you start burning a little bit of extra glucose, and things start happening at the cellular level. And a lot of my research works with cells, animals, and humans, but we're trying to understand how are you improving your health with exercise, or how are you improving your health by not sitting, or by not being sedentary. And there's a lot of evidence now that DNA, has everybody here heard about DNA? You all like CSI? Right? So DNA is this really cool thing that helps you to be who you are, but it's not only about figuring out who the criminals are. DNA is really interesting in that some of your DNA is turned on by exercise. Other parts of your DNA are turned on by sitting. And if you turn on your sitting DNA, if I call it that, that actually promotes certain proteins and things in your body to develop that are actually going to cause disease. So these things are bad. So when you stop sitting, you stop this disease pathway from happening. Then when you exercise, you activate these other exercise pathways that are totally different to promote health. So by not sitting and moving more, so sit less, move more, you're actually turning off your disease-causing pathways and you're turning on your health promotion pathways at the DNA level. This is really cool science. This is why we need to do basic science. So when I talk to the government, I keep telling them, if you want to learn more about DNA, you got to fund basic research. And then eventually these things, you know, a little bit down the road, turn into how we can influence human health. And 3 medications that are some of the best medications we know now actually are things that mimic what exercise do. So if you're diabetic, you might be on metformin. If you have heart disease, you might be on an ACE inhibitor or an angiotensin receptor blocker. For those of you that are on those pills, you know what I'm talking about, but it's unlikely you knew that that mimics what exercise does. The interesting thing is that if we know exercise can lead to the creation of new drugs, maybe there's some other pathways that if we can figure out how sitting is causing disease, maybe we can create some drugs to block that pathway. Right? So doing some basic science at the cellular level or animal level, and then eventually into human trials, we might be able to improve everybody's health through a pharmacological approach. But of course, that's not what these 3 want to talk about. They want to talk about the human's condition. So let's move back into that a little bit. John brought up the simulating space by laying in bed. Okay, how many people watched 3 hours of TV last night? Right? If you watch a Jets game, you're pretty close to watching that 2.5 hours. Right? So if you're laying back and reclining, you actually have a lot of changes that happen, and some of it's in your muscle. The type of muscle you have, if you're laying in bed for 14 days, changes significantly. And the interesting thing is that it goes to a more fast twitch kind of muscle fiber, which in theory should make you run faster, right? But in reality, it fatigues so quickly that you can't do anything. If you put on a cast, a couple of years ago I broke my leg when I was tobogganing with my son, and within 3 days I was telling people, I think my calf is getting smaller from having a broken leg. And reality shows is that muscle gets smaller within 3 days of not doing anything. And the interesting thing about your calf is that when is it turned on most of the time? Okay, when you're walking, or actually more often when you're standing. So if you only stand, you actually protect the quality of muscle in your calf more than if you're actually exercising a lot. So if you're an older adult and you're trying to improve health, stop sitting and standing more should actually maintain the muscle mass you have in your calf. And interestingly, one of the best predictors of are you going to have cardiovascular disease is how quickly you can walk. So those walking tests are actually important. If you can walk 5 meters in a certain short amount of time, you're going to have better health outcomes. But how do you maintain that muscle mass? And it gets back to try to stand up as much as you can, even if you're not exercising. Standing's better than sitting. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, now a question period, but before we do that, I want everybody to stand up. Everybody stand up. Look to the left, look to the right, and then sit down again. Okay, it's just getting your blood flow, just a little bit high. I just extended your life by about 3 minutes. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so we're going to open the floor for questions and comments. And you know, I have a microphone here. I'm going to circulate it around, and please, you know, you can either direct the question to one of the panelists, or you can direct the question to the panel in general, and you know, and let them work it out. Just a little bit of rule here. I want to remind everybody that this is a discussion forum. We ask you that advice on specific problems or treatment is not what the presenters are here to provide. So please, if it's a personal question, maybe you can wait until after. We want questions that are of general enough interest for the entire audience that will be able to generate some discussion. So no personal treatment or issue questions, all right? Okay, and please, during this discussion, feel free to come up and grab some refreshments. So with that then, I'll start the question period. And we'll start right here.
I just have a general question for anyone. Has any research been done on what happens to body mass, activity levels when you retire? I seem to have lost a lot of upper body strength. Not my legs, because I walk my dogs 3 times a day. But it's the upper body that I've created a problem. I wonder if that's general.
Well, we know in terms of just sedentary behavior, we know that it does go up slightly as you get older. It's not related to retirement, though, so I'm not sure exactly that. But from my observation at our center, some people become much more active in retirement. And I think it really depends on what your lifestyle is and what you did in your occupation. And did that hinder activity, and are you in a situation now when you retire that you're more active? From what I see in our center, there are some people who were never active, never did vigorous activity, as Jonathan was saying, and now are very active and do vigorous activity and are in their 80s and 90s and can really show up my 30-year-old son. So it does, age as really no factor in terms of when it gets to fitness. We see a lot of very fit 80-year-olds and some very unfit 80-year-olds, and we see the reverse. We see some very unfit 20-year-olds and very fit. So it's very hard to just kind of say it cut and dry. It really depends on each individual. I don't know if anyone else wanted to comment.
Well, research is showing that when you retire, it goes also with your age, right? Because when you retire, usually you're not 20 unless you got sit for life. So like what we see is, I don't know if it's really retirement or if it's really age, But when you get older, you will have more, you're going to lose some muscle mass. This is for sure, it's going to happen. We call that, when it gets to a certain point, we call that sarcopenia. And there's health benefits attached to that. But for retirement itself, there's studies doing, looking at this, like when you get retired, like when you're retired, what's going on with your physical activity level. And one thing that we know is that they're less active as a general term. So like when you go to work, when you need to move, you need to go to work, you need to get out of there, you need to pick up your kids at the daycare, you need to, so you move more incidental, as a normal behavior compared to when you're retired. But when you're retired, you have more time, so that's where the switch becomes that for some people, they have more time to exercise. But it doesn't mean that they are more active as a total of their day. So they might do exercise, but they might sit more too. So there's a give and take that happens at that time. But there's research, there's studies saying, like trying to get people as soon as they retire, to have health promotion and some strategy to get them into programs, because they might search for something to do to replace that 8 hours a day. And it's working, because they're afraid. A lot of people are afraid, I'm getting nothing right now. And then you're open to something new.
Did it answer your question? Okay. Notice that Danielle's sitting now?
No. I'm not saying we need to stand all day.
No, hear this. In 1972, in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, there was a pilot project, which was a precursor to participation, where they put signs on lawns, boulevards, and the sign said, Goya, G-O-Y-A, October 2nd, 7 p.m. Great advertising, social marketing. When that day approached, they let the cat out of the bag, and they said, on October 2nd, at 7 p.m., you get off your ass and walk around the block. So that's a prescription for sitting.
Okay, so
And Phil stole my thunder because we did a collective coil.
it's obviously not a new idea then.
No.
So we have a question way in the back here. I think, right?
Hi, I see a common thread here tonight about body motion, whether it's sitting up from standing or doing vigorous exercise. Now my question is, what role does proper body alignment and postural mechanics have in overall health, and each of your views on your respective sort of theories for improving health and so on?
Are you trying to get at how some people might get injured because they don't have good posture and such?
Yeah, for sure. Like if you're standing not correctly, you can injure yourself, or further, some sort of imbalance you have in your musculature or mechanical system, whatever. Also, like going from sitting to standing in a proper way, those types of things. Does that factor in with your theories?
In my own theories, it doesn't necessarily factor in. One aspect of what my research group's looking at is frailty. And if I was to ask everybody to close their eyes and imagine what a frail person looks like, it's likely you're going to find, you're going to picture somebody that's walking like this with a walker, right? Well, in reality, frailty is more of a scale, where maybe that person that's walking kind of like I just kind of pretended a little bit might be frail, and they don't have the alignment that you're talking about, and they're more prone to getting certain types of injuries, muscle pulls, things like that. But the physiology or the underlying cause of frailty actually is biological in nature. The muscles are changing. They're not working necessarily from a physiological perspective as well as they can. Any kind of stress that's put on a frail person, that frail person would react more severely or poorly. Their health outcomes, the more frail you are, the worse it is for you. So instead of considering people as either not frail or frail just arbitrarily, you start to give them a score of 1 through 10. You can actually see that there's a nice split between every point that you are on this frailty scale, it's bad, and your health outcomes for cardiovascular disease get worse, your risk of depression gets worse, and these kind of other things. So a question that's not been answered is if you improve their muscle strength, or you improve their fitness levels, or if you kind of bring them back towards health and become less frail, move them back a little bit, maybe they can have better posture and some of these other things. We don't know if that health improvement or defrailing somebody actually would have a beneficial effect. So a different way to think about this too is if somebody comes in and they are more prone to injury, it's unlikely they're going to come back and exercise again, right? So a buddy of mine once told me, and this is rocket science, is you know that old saying, no pain, no gain? The reality is if there's pain, the person's not coming back. So when you're thinking about these things, you have to start out easy, and maybe that's where the simple message of stop sitting, sit less actually starts, and then eventually you want to get to the point where you're sitting less and running more, and then you move on from there. So we all know couch potatoes is bad, but being a spud on the run is not necessarily really good. Right? What you want to do is you want to make sure you're not a couch potato and you're actually active.
Any other panelists want to comment on that?
We think it's important in terms of just the experience of activity in general. So we do a lot of work in terms of muscle balance, posture, in terms of performing exercise, and in terms of sitting, standing. We actually teach people how to get up from, even exercising on the floor, how to get up. And we do a lot in falls prevention. So the minute in our center, when you hit 60, we actually do additional assessments on you, trying to make you aware of these things, not that that's the only time to do it. We just know it's more important for falls prevention because we see a lot of falls even in our center, and we know that that's a key factor in terms of your quality of life and your activity level as you get older. So we find it's a critical factor, and we started incorporating that in the last few years.
Does that sort of address your question?
And there's one area in kids that's starting to emerge called physical literacy, and we have an expert here in the Department of Physiotherapy or Rehab Med that focuses on that. And that hypothesis is that children who move properly and know how to move well will more likely be active further down the road. So if by grade 2 you're not able to throw a ball or skate or move in a fluid manner when you're in gym class, you're less likely to participate in gym class in grade 3 and 4 and 5, and it just gets worse, so by the time you hit high school. And so it's not a posture question, but learning how to move properly in space and having an awareness of moving well could potentially lead to more physical activity in the future.
And I just want to add something towards our study. We already have an occupational therapist on our team. So they will make sure that people that are involved in our study and working on the workstation will actually have a good posture and have the screen being set at the right pace, the right height, so they are well positioned when they actually do their work.
Go ahead.
I have a myth versus fact question. I've got one of those elevated desks now, so I've been standing for about a month. And what I notice is you get quite tired. And I was told that if you elevate your foot, like not both of them, but one at a time, that will assist and make it easier to stand. And that's one of the reasons why in all the old saloons, they had a bar across there. So you could put one leg up and then the other leg up. And I haven't tried that yet, but is there any research that suggests elevating legs alternatively is good for you, or?
That's a really interesting question. First of all, Winston Churchill used to stand at his desk many years ago when he was in power. There's some really interesting pictures of him doing that.
Because he was 4'5". They didn't make desks small enough.
That's possible. But if you were to stand on one leg, I would challenge you to do it for more than a minute or two without having that second foot touching something. So the nice thing about these tall chairs is we have that rung you're talking about to be able to put our foot on. But when I first broke my leg, I tried standing and talking to my kids, and within a minute of standing on one foot, what you'll realize is you're shifting your center of body mass over a bit, and you'll find it challenging unless you actually put that other foot down to kind of have a second anchor point. So make sure you're kind of balancing your weight properly in a comfortable way, first of all, so prevent any kind of injuries. From there, I'm not sure if it's myth or not.
I don't think we have research about that, but if you're standing on one foot, that means that all your weight is on one leg at the same time. So it would be counterintuitive that thinking that you would reduce your fatigue level because you're doing that, because you're overloading one side compared to the other. But in terms of like you're getting fatigued, then it doesn't mean maybe you're standing too much to start with. If someone is running a 10-mile run today, is probably able to stand for 4 hours and without feeling fatigue. So maybe you just need to go more progressively and be able to do it like more and more over time.
Yeah, it's getting better.
Yeah. My saloons have seats.
You know, cyclists have strategies that they use where they actually change the way they use their muscles subtly during a race, so that you can let part of your quadriceps muscle sort of relax and give the load to another part of the same muscle, and sort of shift back and forth like that. And I've often thought that, you know, your particular example is a way to do that, isn't it? You change the position of your legs a little bit, and you change the way that you're doing the same job, and it's sort of a load sharing that allows you to stay at the bar longer. and you know, we've been trying to find ways to stay at the bar longer this first century. So we had a question here. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for your presentations. They were great. So I have a question for anybody who wants to answer either on sedentary behavior or vigorous activity. So I think we automatically think about individual choice when we talk about these things. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on what else we can do rather than focusing on just telling people they should make different choices?
So we're getting into behavior change. How do you support behavior change? On the individual level. Not on the individual level?
Well, rather than just saying, so like when we talked the social marketing example, was telling people that they should get up and do something differently. And we know that in a lot of public health strategies like smoking, a lot of other strategies had to happen for people in some populations to reduce their smoking levels. So do you have suggestions of something at that level, at a population level, that would change sedentary or vigorous activity?
Yeah, I'd love our city planners to have a health and fitness plan as a requirement. So as an example, an analogy might be is when they want to develop a new subdivision, there's an environmental assessment that's done by law. Why don't we have a health and wellness assessment done by law so the planners have to follow the plan? That would be one policy thing that our Minister of Healthy Living can bring in.
And that's what, as you know, active design is all about, is trying to create environments and workplaces where you naturally enjoy being more active or less sedentary. So it's not like a thoughtful process, it just happens because you do that. So I have a printer in my office and I don't think of it, I press print and I just reach over and take it. If you had put my printer on the other side of the office, I would have easily got up and got it without thinking. I would have not thought of having to make a choice. And I think we have to start getting to a place where we're trying to make ourselves move without thinking about it. And that's why we're all here interested in trying to get activity, is that movement is not natural anymore. It's an effort and something we're choosing to do. So you want to make it as easy as possible. And some places are just easier to naturally be active. And think about what that space, why was it more active? Like when I was in that fitness center, there was the traditional fitness center, but every office was so open and you wanted to be sitting on those machines and being active. You wanted to do it. It wasn't like thinking, oh no, I got to sit on this machine and start exercising. It was easy to do because they created the environment to make it nice to do.
If we transported farmers from 100 years ago to this meeting right now, or indigenous people from 400 years ago into this meeting, they would laugh. So my third message, I forgot, sorry, it came back to me. Sitting doesn't get you, or standing doesn't get you high, right? My public health message is get outside and get active because you feel good, right? And that's it. I mean, if you had to convince people to be active, find a friend and do it to feel good, right? I think we emphasize you got to lose weight. You got to look like Lance Armstrong. You got to fit into spandex. But really, the main benefit that I felt after that run today was great. I just felt better. And I think active spaces are green spaces, right? Getting outside makes you just feel better. So if there was a message that we should all adopt, it's be active to feel good, right? And don't worry about the other things that come with it.
Just finish your question, like what will make those policies happening is having research saying that is actually a problem. So unless we have like really good proof that sedentary behavior is a problem and we need to react to it, then it won't happen because for now it's not like strong evidence.
No.
And John is just happy to fit in spandex too.
Okay, we had a question in the back.
Hi, thanks for your comments and everything. I have a question about the correlation between resistance training and the bone density loss as well as muscle mass loss compared to the sedentary lifestyle. So if you are to resistance train 1 hour to an hour and a half a day, how will that counter? Is there any research to counteract the sedentary lifestyle that you have? As a student, I sit all day, so just wondering about whether my 45-minute workout today was worth it or not. Like when it comes to balancing, should I be standing more or should I be trying to get in those hour workouts?
Well, I would start by saying that if you did 45-minute high resistance training today, you're better than doing none. Right? So it doesn't matter if you sit, you're getting 45 minutes of exercise, so you're at least turning on the healthy pathways a bit. Ideally, you're going to do that 3, 4, 5 times a week, and you're going to do it at a level that get your heart rate going a little bit. Danielle's done some nice research recently looking at how high resistance training actually has an aerobic component. So there's some evidence there. But you have to remember, sitting is not the opposite of being physically active. They're two different concepts, and that's what really came up in Sue's introduction, right? So you can actually sit for 23.5 hours a day and get all those disease-promoting pathways going, and go and run or lift weights for 30 minutes and still be considered physically active. So then you're simultaneously sedentary and active, which is mind-boggling to a lot of people, right? So you have to try to affect both sides of that equation.
And I think for older people, it's more important. So as a student, it's great, and it's a behavior you probably want to hang on to the rest of your life. But as you get older, I said fitness before was a really powerful predictor of health, but muscle strength, Danielle's husband promotes this quite a bit, is as you get older, that becomes a really powerful predictor. So if we talk about frailty, or we talk about quality of life or independent mobility, being strong makes a difference. So I think as you get older, adding those things into your life have a huge effect.
I'm actually teaching that tomorrow in class, so I kind of brush on it today.
So
there's some evidence.
Classroom?
He needs to get there. There's some evidence that are published by the American College of Sport Medicine of how strong are the evidence about different things. And one of those is how much do we know about resistance training and bone density. And the evidence is about B2SC, meaning that we don't have overwhelming results saying that if you do resistance training, you will increase your bone mass density. So it's there, but it's not convincing as much as doing moderate vigorous intensity will increase your VO2 max, per se, or your fitness level. But for sedentary behavior, we have no clue. Like, I've never seen anything about like doing resistance training will compensate for your sitting, or we're not there yet. Maybe a new idea that just came up.
Yes, I'm wondering if there's been any studies done on people living in 2 stories as against bungalows. You know, if they are in better shape when they're older. Like a lot of people who are getting older, as I am, seem to want to move into bungalows or one-level apartments. We're in a 2-story, so we're constantly going up and down. I'm wondering if that's, should we just stay there?
Yeah, don't sell your house and keep going in the stairs. But we don't know. Yeah, there's no such thing. But we're looking for simplicity and less risk of falling, and that's usually the solution. But that's the problem that we have most of the time, is that we're taking the easy way out, and that's like an easy way out. So I'm pretty sure, like, if we had to just like take a picture, like John was saying, a cross-sectional study about people having like to go through stairs, and people having a bungalow, but you need to be careful, because I know that a lot of older adults, what they do is they get the laundry on the first level, and they do have it 2-3 stories, but everything is done on one floor, and they go one time for Christmas to get their jars, and that's it, right? So we need to be careful when we generalize to everyone.
So I don't know if I remember what Vic taught me back when he was my prof when I was an undergrad. I think the very first study that got us all rolling was the old bus drivers in the UK, comparing the drivers to the ticket takers who were going up stairs all day. They had far fewer heart attacks than the bus drivers. So then we'd have to argue, what was it? Was it the bus driver sitting that gave him the heart attack? Or was it getting up and down the stairs, being active, which protected you from the heart
And
attacks?
I think we had a comment, sort of a supplementary comment on that.
I had a question.
Okay, well, there was a gentleman just before you here. And I'm going to pass it to you.
Stay tuned.
So it's not very often that I get a chance to have a little bit of control over a panel such as yours. So can I ask that, Jonathan, you don't answer this first question? Sure. And you do address the second one?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so Jonathan mentioned the idea that screen time was a culprit, if I heard you correctly, with young people, or should be addressed. Would the other three panelists give a thumbs up, neutral, or a thumbs down as to whether or not you agree with that, or whether that's a common theme?
Yeah. A lot of research related to sitting is related to also with screen time, so I would agree.
That's a thumb up or thumb down.
Oh.
I'd be a thumbs up, but I'd ask John if it's actually looking at the screen or if it's sitting while you're looking at the screen.
Or eating with the screen.
Or eating with the screen.
Or not exercising while you're on the screen.
Because that's better than my second question. Go for it, John.
So yeah, so actually in kids they have the experiment. So the experiment was, and it was done, I'll call it a stealth intervention, but the parents were given a little monitor that went in between the TV and the electrical outlet in their house. So you had to plug it into this device, and it turned the TV off after 2 hours. So the kids would have to strategically watch their shows, right? So one group got it, the other group didn't. And the group that got it, they lost more weight over time than the group that just had regular TV. And it didn't change their activity. It changed their eating patterns. So if we just look at obesity as the outcome in that case, pulling the kids away from the screens stopped their eating behavior. Or non-biological eating behavior, right? Something about walking in and watching The Hobbit makes me want to eat popcorn. I don't know why. So I think that's the key. Now the other big one is having a screen at bedtime is affecting sleep habits, and we're starting to see that sleep is the next smoking. Maybe that'll be one for next year. If you're not getting enough sleep, it affects your behavior, your eating behavior, and so that might be another one in kids. If we're having those screens at night, it's affecting the way they sleep and the way they eat.
And if they have a TV in their own bedroom too, it's been shown that they are more not tempted, but they're more at risk of being obese. So maybe you should change how your kids have, what they have in their rooms.
The kids shouldn't smoke in bed either.
It's all very good that everybody should get up and be less sedentary, but what about the people that are confined to wheelchairs or can't move very much for other reasons?
So that's a really interesting question, because you got to get back to what is it about the sitting that's bad? And you could also ask the question, what is it about exercise is good, and what does exercise really mean? The whole idea of trying to get people to sweat isn't necessarily always the important part. So the sitting is bad because you're not necessarily activating some of your muscles at a minimum level. Like very few people here would say standing is exercise, right? But when you're in a wheelchair, you're not getting those muscles activating. You're not necessarily getting some of the metabolic kind of things that those few muscles in your legs would be able to actually have. But you're also not getting signals up your spinal cord. You're not getting the feedback into your central nervous system and some other kind of things that kind of relate into this. When you're standing also, you have to be able to maintain a certain amount of blood pressure to challenge your heart. So the physiological stress of standing is only slightly more than sitting. But it's probably just barely enough to be able to get a physiological outcome to be able to improve your health. It would be similar to laying in bed. Or laying in bed would be bad. And that's why, how many people here have gotten up in the morning after sleeping for 8 hours and they get up really quickly and they see stars? Okay, that's actually because your blood pressure is not adjusting fast enough to be able to get enough blood to your head, and you're kind of seeing stars just because you have a momentary kind of lapse and you've got to readjust really quickly. Well, when you're in a wheelchair for a prolonged period of time, you don't have those kind of signals. You're not challenging your cardiovascular system the same kind of way. So there's things about standing or not sitting that are actually not exercise related, but they are physiology related, to be able to change the way your body's kind of receiving certain types of input or certain types of challenges. So when you're in bed for a long time in a hospital, you'll probably see stars more often, and that would be kind of related to this physiological challenge that you have to be under.
But there's lots of exercise you can get sitting down as well. In terms of activity programs, we have a lot of programs where people are sitting. You can use weights, you can do movements use resistance tubing. So you can still get a lot of exercise. And remember, tonight's topic was just sitting. Is it the new smoking? But really, I think you're hearing all of us, more is always better. And so rather than just standing, we'd rather see people even not only standing, but doing some more movement and trying to think of it as movement is always better, and the more you can get. So if you are constrained to a wheelchair, I would suggest arm movements. If you have some movement in the legs, just contracting the muscles would help. What you're trying to do is trying to activate muscles and get your metabolism up. That's what's really important.
But less sitting the better, right?
Less sitting the better.
Or water-based exercises, or exercises where you're not weight bearing.
And we're here because we're talking about health behavior. And we're talking about exercise and sitting, but there's also like eating and everything else that comes with it, like sleeping that we talked about, and there's many healthy behavior, not smoking and everything. So when you package this, the perfect person will do all of those. If someone is confined in a wheelchair and don't exercise for that reason, even though there's options, there's like 8 more healthy behavior that you can target. So like when we're talking about health, it can be defined in different ways. And when we compile all of those together, that's a perfect world. But it's not going to be the perfect world for a lot of people. And being confined is only one thing that you can target for your lower body. But you can do other things for your health.
Interesting fact that fitness versus non-sedentary activity. I just wonder if it was any merit in looking into what is the level of fitness we need to get kids or adolescent ages up to, and with knowing a level of fitness that we need would be that is the question to help them to use changes in their sedentary activity later to bring them away from any chronic conditions or away from chances of obesity or anything. Just to know your opinion if that's a good question or...
So I could give the answer around children because we actually studied that. When a child does the beep test at school, there's a category that you'll get classified in. Back when I was in school, I think it was JFK that started the President's Gold Medal, so you'd get a gold medal or a gold star. And we found that if your fitness was less in the needs improvement, so in the bottom 40th percentile, so if you could just get to the mean, if it was less than that, you were 3 times more likely to be overweight within a year or 2 as a child. So getting them into that range. And there were schools that once they found that out, the gym teachers were targeting activities to get kids more fit so that they could actually get into that range. The thing that I try to sell to, I mean, you see in terms of ages where things start to fall apart, university students fall apart quickly. And then retiring, you fall apart quickly. And being fit allows you to do activities that get you into a group. And I think with kids, they just want to feel like they're part of something. And I think the more fit a child is, the more likely they can play different games that are out there. So in addition to targeting a certain fitness level, it would be finding games that kids could all play that would boost up their fitness, but they would do it in a group so that they felt like they belong.
It was more kind of to add to exactly that. I find that a lot of the games that kids play, because we are so stuck with the path of least resistance, most of the games that we play in gym would be you can easily avoid getting fit by avoidance, avoidant personalities. You can say we have a girls' gym class. What the girls will do will line themselves at the walls. They can't throw far enough because they're frail. They can't throw far enough to hit the other people, but they can avoid being hit. And so the game will continue, but no one's ever going to actually be taken out of the game. And so it's also very the social aspect, having how the gyms in schools are very gross, just generally. And only 1 treadmill works out of 6. So nobody's going to stand beside you and talk. Also, antisocials will not want to be part of gym because it's usually an attack. So is there a way to get people who are avoidant to not avoid all of these little social aspects?
That's interesting. I like your comments because I have friends back in Sherbrooke that work, they do studies in phys ed classes. And what they see is that the mean of actually being active at moderate intensity that we're targeting is reduced from about 58 minutes at primary school to about 8 minutes as a mean at high school. And what we see is there's some people at 100% of their time in the phys ed class being like 100% of the time at moderate intensity, and you see also 0%. And when you do the mean, it's 8. So that means that there's some like elite guys or girls that are doing all the work, and as you say, and we see that on video, and it's pretty impressive, and it's exactly what you're describing. People are getting into line, and then when you have 30 children are going everywhere in the class, and they go back into the line, and they never went and do whatever the activity was. And so there's a lot of phys ed teacher out there trying to have like strategy, be more strategic about how you create your environment so people will feel included in their own little settings. And how you get the leaders, that's the gang that has 100%. I have a friend that's her field of research, is getting the leaders in the gym class to feel that they're leaders, and get the other one that are not interested in that class to become interested, and that's a challenge. But there's a lot of work done on that right now. You will not see that. You'll probably be an adult when you get there. But it's something that we know. And it's a concern.
And adults just get more sophisticated at avoiding. It's not so obvious.
You don't go at all.
Yeah, because just in terms of fitness design and designing fitness centers, that comes into mind, all those things you said. Like the #1 factor in a fitness center is cleanliness, by far. More important than anything, and machines working, and comfortable locker rooms. Like, it's just one more excuse to avoid the activity, correct? So, it's very important. It's not only important with kids, it's important with adults. And you might not know that, but we know that from just designing fitness facilities. Like every time you go for a shower, if you can't hook up your towel, it's just another thing that just ticks you off, and that could be the one thing that stops your activity. So I just think adults just it's not as obvious, but it's the same thing. It's just in a different setting, and probably they're very, maybe some are very not quiet, but some are quiet and we just walk away and we lose them. In a gym setting, they have to stay there.
It's interesting that you bring up phys ed and how a lot of people actually, it's a big majority of people, avoid being active in those settings. How many people here took phys ed when they were young? Okay. How many of you played volleyball in phys ed? And how many of you playing volleyball today? Okay, and this is important because the things that we learned in phys ed, how relevant are they to where we are in our current stage of life? And these guys might think this is sacrilege, but maybe we don't need to promote exercise, and maybe the way to get people to sit less is to maybe have leisure education rather than physical education, right? Like we can get people back, right? And you know, there's health value. One of our leisure researchers in kinesiology shared a document with me, a paper showing that there's health benefits of knitting. And the concept is that sometimes doing something to be able to be in a group setting just has some health benefits. And I find it hard to believe that knitting would be exercise unless you're quite vigorously knitting something. But we have to think about how do we teach our children to be able to find leisure activities that they're going to be able to do in their lifelong kind of approaches. And there have been changes to the phys ed curriculum to try to promote these kind of things, but I think we still have a long way to go on that. And then if you continue the leisure education perspective later in life, you can talk about this in every stage of your life and finding things that are appropriate for the physical functioning level that you're at.
Howie would be rolling in his grave right now if you heard him say that. One last thing though. So what we did, and if there are phys ed teachers out here, we were working with some kids who are not normally active. So first rule, you had to find games that were as equitable as possible. So you gave the advantage to kids that may not have been as good. So if there was a really fit kid in there, I made rules that he had to work so much harder to get involved in the game. And that is as simple as no hogging. Like you have to have 5 passes before you can score a point. The other one is to make sure that you have equal, you might have an all-girls class and they're playing wallflower dodgeball, but if you try to pair up the activities into people that are of equal fitness level, right, or equal sport level, we were using heart rate monitors and the youth were getting their heart rates at 90% of max for 45 minutes because the game was fair and it was fun. And the other thing was it was outside, which was really good. So in terms of phys ed teachers, you can easily strategize your gym class to make it so that you get the most out of it. And I totally agree with Todd that we need to make things more relevant to kids so that when they leave high school that they're going to be able to continue those activities.
Incidentally, Jacques Plante used to use knitting to improve his goalkeeping ability. So it does have very good carryover value.
Yeah, and Todd has never tried to knit with his feet. That takes a lot of energy. That's a fitness
question.
Sorry. I have a question for Danielle. So you're talking about treadmills. I work in a family physician's office. There's no way I'm going to get a treadmill because I'm running back and forth and getting patients. But when I have my 1 hour of charting, because we're playing around, everybody's sitting at our stations, sitting on a ball, and what kind of ball, and how long, and what kind of benefit would you get? Because we can move that from one room to the next, and be probably able to do some ergonomics, not too bad with it. But where it's not possible to have a treadmill, and you're usually running, but there's 1 hour of sit time, charting time, would sitting on a ball be of any benefit, or something like that, instead of standing? So I'm going to stand at my station, it's not going to be possible.
Well, I have no, I didn't really see a lot of health benefits associated with those balls that we see everywhere. I can see that it would be, in terms of abdominal muscle or something, might be targeted, and your balance and targeting like muscle that are not usually targeted when you're sitting. But I will not agree probably that it's equivalent to standing or because you're still sitting. And the problem is that we even have some evidence that if you're standing only like about 5 times a day, and regardless of the time that you're sitting, will be benefit for the different health benefits. And also, like, we need to be careful when we talk about comparing those strategies. What is the outcome? Are we talking about insulin? Like, are we talking about like cardiovascular disease risk factors? Are we talking about mental benefits? Are we talking about like there's different things we can talk about? So if we're talking about posture, maybe it helps. If we're talking about health, like cardiovascular health behavior, I don't see why it would help because there's no difference in terms of heart rate. It's basically the same thing as sitting. I don't have many studies about those balls. It looks cool, but for now, that's pretty much what I can say about it.
It's good for your back.
And some people probably in here, chiropractor or a physiotherapist, might have more accurate information about that.
Because you're on the ball.
I think we have one last question for Janine.
Right here.
I have a question.
Have one there.
Okay. My question's about, you're talking about physical phys ed class and that kind of activity and kids who do phys ed and continuing on after school. What about children who participate in community club organized sports? Not the competitive like sports teams, but just general like mini soccer and then heading all the way up through past early years into middle years in community club sports and being on team sports. Does that tend to carry through into adulthood more so than kids that just go to phys ed at school?
I'll just have one comment that I saw like a study maybe 6 months ago, and what they're showing is that we never had as many organized activities outside of school for kids. And the more we have organized activities, the less they are organizing themselves to do activities. So we're basically doing the same thing as we do for us, saying that we'll go to the gym an hour and then we're done with it. So I think what the message that we send to parents about those organized activities is as long as they get their kids to go to soccer once a week or three times a week, then they did their job. And we see, I don't know in your neighborhood, but in my neighborhood, there's no kids playing around. I don't even know if there are kids on my street. I know there's at least one, mine. But we don't see kids outside. But we see them going to like spots like my gym for kids, and we see, so organized stuff, without thinking about it, might be a good solution. When we look at the widespread of it and how much not active enough kids are, I don't see this is the solution to get kids to be active. So your question like being, if they're doing this, are they doing more after? Probably what John was saying, like if they have fun and they have a social component of it, they might like it enough to keep searching for those activities that are organized. When you get older, you might not find what you're looking for because organized activities for being active are not as present in your neighborhood. Like you might go to gyms and everything, but like close to your place, having time to go with all the responsibility that you have at that age compared to when you're a kid, might not make it. So it looks like a good idea, but I'm not sure. I don't have research. It's more like a convenient opinion.
Yeah, activity doesn't really track, and organized activity I don't really have any information about, but I'll share a story with you. Who knows Paul Placas? He's a fitness guy. He has a show called X-Weighted. Okay, so he used to go into families, and he'd have an overweight child in the family, and then Paul would try to make them fit, right? And so Paul's really bad. He would tell the kid, you know, do you want to be teased your whole life? Blah, blah, blah. But one of these stories really resonated with me because Dad was trying to get the child into baseball, right? And you could tell he hated every minute of it because he wasn't very good at it. And then a week later, Paul took them hiking in the Rockies, and he was beaming, right? It was being outside, it was being with other people, with the family, with other groups, and there wasn't a skill component that came with it, right? So he could do it, and he was great at it. And then at the end of that, he said, we have to do this again. So if there was something that I would promote to kids, it would be get outside. Like, learn to love the outdoors, and that you can do for the rest of your life.
Okay, we're going to close this cafe. We're running out of time here, and I feel bad for the panelists because they've been sitting for 2 minutes. So let's thank our panelists. Something tonight. Let's thank Janine also for organizing this on behalf of the University of Manitoba. Look at the University of Manitoba website for the next cafes that are coming up. There's one on March 18th, I believe, on concussion, what it does to your brain. I think it's going to be here. I think the panelists are probably going to stick around for another 10 minutes for those of you that were too shy to put up your hand and ask a question. So thanks for being such a great audience, and I guess stand up and live.